In the quiet neighborhoods of Chicago in the 1970s, life felt safe, predictable, and ordinary. Families filled the suburbs, community events thrived, and neighbors knew each other by name. But behind one of those doors, behind one carefully crafted mask, lived a man whose hidden life would become one of the most disturbing cases in American criminal history. And this is the story of John Wayne Gacy, a man who appeared friendly, hardworking, and community-minded, while also hiding some of the most darkest and disturbing secrets in modern America. Welcome back to another episode of The Shade Hour. Today we will be taking a deep dive into John Wayne Gacy's life, starting from since he was just a little boy all the way until the day he died. If you like these kind of videos, I recommend subscribing because we go over true crime, supernatural, and paranormal things weekly. Well, besides last week, but I've been very busy, so starting now, we drop weekly videos going over supernatural, paranormal, and true crime, just like this video. And with that being said, grab a snack, sit back, relax, because we have reached the Shade Hour. John Wayne Gacy was born on March 17th, 1942 in a working-class family on Chicago's North Side. His upbringing was far from easy. Gacy grew up with a father who struggled with alcohol and showed frequent hostility towards him. He faced harsh criticism and emotional distance, experiences that left deep impressions on him. Despite these difficulties, though, Gacy often tried to win approval. He involved himself in school activities, volunteered, and sought opportunities to feel needed and valued. But even at a young age, he learned how to separate his public appearance from his private struggles. This pattern, two different lives, would soon follow him into adulthood. In his early adult years, Gacy worked various jobs and married his first wife. He soon demonstrated a talent for leadership and organization. In Iowa, he managed a fast food restaurant and became part of the local Josseys, a civic group involved in business, networking, and community service. To outsiders, he appeared ambitious and driven. He took part in charity work, social gatherings, and political events. Co-workers described him as friendly, sometimes overly friendly, but charismatic enough to rise quickly in community roles. But at the same time all this was happening, troubling patterns began to emerge beneath the surface. Although the nature of these incidents cannot be described in detail here on YouTube, they led to his first major legal trouble and eventually imprisonment in the late 1960s. After serving time, Gacy returned to Illinois to rebuild his life. Back in Chicago, Gacy moved into a house in the suburban area of Norwood Park. He remarried, started his own small contracting business, PDM Contractors, and became known as someone who always was willing to lend a hand. His company often hired young men who needed work experience, which further ingrained him in the community. Gacy also developed connections in local politics. He held parties, volunteered, and got to know influential people in the area. He seemed like the last person anyone would suspect of wrongdoing, and then in a bizarre twist that later would become infamous, Gacy began to perform as a clown. Under the name Pogo, he visited hospitals, charity events, fundraisers, and parades. He loved the attention, the smiles, the applause. To many, he was simply a cheerful community entertainer. It was an image that would later horrify the world, because behind the makeup was a man living a disturbing double life. Throughout the early to mid 1970s, young men and teenage boys began mysteriously disappearing around the Chicago area. Many were last seen near where they worked, traveled, or lived alone. At the same time, police did not yet have the tools, databases, or communication systems that modern law enforcement relies on today. Cases weren't always connected, and young males were historically not the highest priority. Several of these disappearances had a common thread. Some of the young men had recently been offered work or had connections to Gacy's contracting business, but with no evidence linking him to the cases, Gacy went on with his life undisturbed. He attended political gatherings, hosted neighborhood barbecues, and maintained the image of a friendly, dependable contractor. By the late 1970s, Chicago area police departments were starting to notice unusual patterns. Families of missing boys insisted that their loved ones didn't just run away. Witnesses occasionally reported seeing certain individuals last seen with Gacy, but without firm proof, suspicion alone wasn't enough. Everything changed, though, in December of 1978. A teenager named Robert Peast disappeared after telling his mother he was going to talk to a local contractor, John Wayne Gacy, about a potential job. When he failed to return home, his family immediately contacted police. This time, investigators acted quickly. They went to Gacy's home to question him. He gave inconsistent statements, appearing nervous and evasive. Detectives began researching his background and discovered his past criminal record in Iowa, something the community had never known. Their suspicion grew. Over the next several days, police put Gacy under near constant surveillance. Teams of officers followed him everywhere, restaurants, stores, and even friends' houses. What they observed was a man growing increasingly paranoid. Meanwhile, detectives obtained a search warrant for his home. When they entered the residence, they noticed a strong, unexplained odor coming from the crawl space beneath the house. At the time, they didn't have the authority to start digging, but the smell stayed with them. They also found items belonging to several missing boys. With evidence mounting and inconsistencies piling up, investigators secured a second warrant, this time allowing them to fully search the crawl space. And what they found would change the course of the investigation forever. During the full search of Gacy's property, police uncovered human remains buried beneath the house. Most remains were eventually found on the property and in nearby areas. The scale of what had happened was staggering. Once confronted with evidence, Gacy confessed to numerous killings, committing them over the course of several years. The final count would reach 33 victims, one of the highest confirmed totals of a single offender in American history. The discovery shocked the entire nation. A man who had volunteered at hospitals, entertained children as a clown, and hosted political gatherings had been living a hidden life of extraordinary darkness. Gacy was arrested on December 21st, 1978, and charged with multiple counts of murder. His trial began in the early 1980s and drew enormous media attention. Courtrooms were packed. The public wanted answers. How had a man so involved in his community concealed such horrific acts for so long? Defense attorneys attempted to argue that Gacy had been mentally unstable, suffering from disorders that impaired his judgment. The prosecution countered that Gacy had carefully planned, concealed, and manipulated his actions, which demonstrated clear intent and awareness. After weeks of testimony, analysis, and emotional statements, the jury deliberated for only a short time. Gacy was convicted on all counts. He was sentenced to death. Gacy would then go on to spend 14 years on death row at Menard Correctional Center. While incarcerated, he gave interviews, created artwork, and attempted to portray himself as misunderstood or wrongfully accused. Claims that were roundly rejected both by the courts and the public. During this time, his case became a subject of intense study by criminal psychologists, law enforcement agencies, and behavioral researchers. They wanted to understand how someone with such a big public image could maintain such an extreme double life. Gacy's execution was then carried out in 1994. The legacy of the Gacy case extends beyond the crimes themselves. It changed how missing person cases were handled, encouraged better integrity, communication, and contributed to advancement in criminal profiling. The case also prompted communities to re-examine the idea of stranger danger. Gacy was not an unknown figure lurking in the shadows. He was a neighbor, an employer, a volunteer, and even a clown who entertained children. His life demonstrated that dangerous individuals do not always fit the stereotypes society expects. The victims of John Wayne Gacy are remembered today through memorials, documentaries, books, and continuing discussion about how to protect vulnerable individuals. Efforts continue to identify all victims and give closure to families still seeking answers to this day. John Wayne Gacy's story is not remembered because of who he pretended to be, but because of the countless lives he took and the families forever changed by his actions. The case stands as a chilling reminder of deception, manipulation, and the importance of recognizing warning signs. But it is also a story of determination, of detectives who refused to ignore suspicious details, of families who demanded answers, and of communities that came together in the aftermath of the tragedy. As we look back on this case, we confront on uncomfortable truths. Evil can wear a friendly smile, and it can hide in the most ordinary places. But with that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed today's video as we went over John Wayne Gacy's life story. Now remember, you don't know what's going behind closed doors, so stay safe, stay aware, and stay mindful. With that being said, my name is Cam, and I'll see you next time on The Shade Hour.